Hello everyone and welcome to my explainer video for automation. Okay, so automation has been around for some years. I mean, even as far back as like 2012, we've been automating networks and servers. But as time's gone by, automation has got a lot more prolific in the enterprise and service provider and data center spaces. So automation, it's a vast subject. There is so many different platforms that we can use to automate our devices and our services. I mean, if we look at this diagram here, we have just about 20 or so devices here, split into, different areas: London, Manchester, America, and Asia, for argument's sake. Now, in the old days, what we used to do is, if for argument's sake we were deploying, say, network devices like routers, switches, firewalls, load balancers, things like that, what we would do, we would have to go on to every single device via the command line, and we would have to manually do our configurations. If we needed to upgrade, say, access control lists, we wanted to put in different routing protocols, different IP addresses on different loopback interfaces, anything you can think of. We used to have to go in one at a time and configure these devices manually. Sometimes we used to be able to cheat a little bit and use something like secure CRT with a multi-terminal, but that still required us to connect to every single device and basically manually put in what we wanted to do to make changes. Now, the same happens with servers. So with servers, you'd have to SSH into multiple different servers, one after the other, to put what changes you want in. So you imagine you have, say, a server cluster, let's say 10 servers, and you want to put in something like Nginx, and you want to put in a DHCP services, you want to put in a database or something like that. You have to go onto each individual one, and we used to have to do all of that stuff manually, one at a time, and it was very time consuming. The problem with doing things manually as well is you have what we call the fat finger syndrome, which means we make mistakes. We're human, we do make mistakes from time to time. You hit the wrong button, instead of pressing a 9, you press an 8 by mistake, and all of a sudden you've completely ruined the configuration, but you've not noticed it because of fatigue, oversight, things like that. So the idea of automation is just to allow us and the businesses that we work for and the businesses that we actually support to actually be more streamlined and more efficient in the way that we're dealing with their equipment, whether again they're network equipment, whether they're servers, whether they're virtual machines, and basically anything that you can connect with via the likes of SSH or HTTPS or with REST APIs, things like that, then you can automate that. And that's exactly where we're heading now. I mean, automation is one of the key skills of every network engineer, every sysadmin, every cloud engineer. The ability to actually automate is in demand because it's not going anywhere. In fact, it's going forward more than anything else. I mean, we do have things like AI, we have cloud, all these latest buzzwords, but at the end of the day, automation is the key. That's where everything is automation, and that's what we're going to be looking at in the series of videos that we're going to be going through. We're going to have a look at how automation works. We're going to start choosing a couple of different platforms, and there are many different platforms. So for argument's sake, as we said, in the old days, everything had to be done manually, but with automation, you can just have one client there. You can have your automation controller, and your automation controller can go through the network and automatically connect to all your devices and start pushing out config. So instead of doing like we used to do before, one at a time, you can now push out configurations to 10, 20, 1,000 devices at once. This entirely speeds things up, and it gets away from the human error aspect of it as well. As long as you're configuration scripts or your configuration playbooks are correct and you validated them in the likes of your lab so they do exactly what you want them to do, then it's fire and forget. You do it and it's done. And that saves a lot of work. I mean, I remember times where I've had my bosses in the past come up to me and they said to me, Dickie, we need you to configure 300 routers for SSH access, or SNMP v3 or something like that. And I've had to go through and think to myself, well, how do I approach this? Do I start logging on to them one at a time, and do I then sit there and start typing out the same commands, or maybe get a bit clever and put them into a notepad and copy and paste? No, you sit there and the first thing you think to yourself is, I have a task, can I automate this task? So as long as you have access to these devices in one way or another, as we said, SSH, Netconf, HTTPS, etc., then you automate them. There's nothing to clap yourself on the back with by doing everything manually. In the old days, we were CLI guys. We all liked the CLI, but times have changed now. So again, the whole idea is, you have your connection, you have the ability to use a singular device that can reach all of the devices on your network that you're operating within, and you automate everything. Now, when it comes down to choosing which platforms to use for automation, that is slightly different. That depends on a couple of factors. It depends on what you're automating. So whether it's network equipment, whether it's just firewalls, whether it's servers. So depending on what you're automating, each of those have a slightly better use case. It also depends on what protocols you have access to. I mean, at the end of the day, let's say you don't have SSH, well, then that will knock out, a few different platforms that you can use. Let's say, for argument's sake, you are unable to install any software on your network equipment. You can't install any Python programs or any Linux scripts on any of the routers, switches, firewalls, etc. Then that would mean that you'd want something that's agentless, that doesn't need anything to be installed on the target device. So as I said, it literally depends on what you want to do. There are a few. I said there's probably about 10, maybe 11 in total different sort of automation stacks that are common, in the networking and server administration world at the moment. You got the likes of Ansible, which is my personal favorite. It's agentless, so that means that you don't have to install anything on the target device. All you need is for it to have access to the likes of SSH or Netconf or RESTCONF, and it can connect. That's fine. And not only that, the likes of Ansible is really good because it uses YAML, yet another markup language. It's kind of very human readable, so you don't need to know a lot of programming, or virtually any, to be honest, to be able to use that. The only downside is that it's not declarative, so that means that you can't sit there and say, okay, I want X to happen. Let's say I want BGP. Let me give you a good example. Let's say I want a BGP area 10 configured. You need to tell it what to do. You can't just say this is what I want. You do have other devices, other platforms like say Terraform, which is declarative, where you tell it what you want and Terraform will go off and actually do this for you. And the good thing with Terraform as well is that it's agentless yet again. But Terraform doesn't use SSH, it doesn't use Netconf, it basically uses REST APIs. And these first two we've gone through, these are open source. In fact, most of them are open source, actually, to be honest with you. Then you've got the likes of Puppet. Now, Puppet is, again, declarative, so you tell it what you want, but it's not agentless. It requires you to have agent installed on the target devices, but these are mainly used for server configurations. Again, you got the likes of Chef. Again, this is another platform. It's not declarative, it's not agentless either. It uses the likes of HTTP, SSH. Again, though, this is used for automated infrastructure. I think that runs off the top of my head Ruby. on Ruby. So you got the likes of Nornir as well, which you can use that in conjunction with Netbox. Again, it's agentless, again not declarative, but uses like the likes of SSH, Netconf, REST APIs. It's basically inventory-based network automation, but it's based on Python. Then you've got other specific platforms like Cisco's NSO, their network services orchestration. This again is agentless. You don't need anything to be installed on the target device, but it is declarative as well, so that's quite good. You can use Netconf, you can use CLI access, you can use RESTCONF. This is mainly used in like big service providers and enterprise providers as well. Then you got the likes of Juniper's Apstra, which is virtually the same, as what Cisco does. Used mainly to do Juniper devices, but the thing is, Juniper's Apstra and Cisco's NSO, they're not limited to just their respective vendor. They can use multiple vendors as well. Then you got the likes of PyATS. Now, PyATS is not really per se an automation platform. It's more of a network testing and validation platform. And again, it's like the Apstra and the NSO, you can run that against multiple vendors as well. You can run PyATS against Cisco, Juniper, Arista, Hewlett-Packard stuff. It's really quite good actually, but that has a slightly different use case. As I said, that's mainly for testing and validation. That's what that particular platform's for. So there are quite a few different platforms out there. They have their use cases, and it literally depends again on what the company has access to, because these are all open source apart from the Cisco's NSO and Juniper Apstra, where you have to purchase both of those licensed through the respective vendor. All the other platforms are all open source, so it costs you nothing to actually run. So again, comes down to what the company wants to use, what sort of devices the company's doing, and to some extent down to the engineers and what familiarity they have as well. Because while they virtually all do a similar thing, they're not all the same. Some do require you to know more about Python. So some do require you to know how to do coding. Some don't require anything at all. Some use, files in YAML. Some don't. So it literally depends again on all these factors. So there is no, this one is the best. There are, some are more popular than others. I mean, so for argument's sake, the likes of Ansible and Terraform are more popular than the likes of Nornir or the Cisco and Juniper platforms. But that doesn't mean they're any less good for doing what they want to do. So some of these platforms have a steep learning curve, some don't. So what we're going to do ourselves is, in the upcoming videos, we are going to be going through Ansible. We'll be having a look at the likes of Nornir as well, and a couple of other these platforms, and we'll start automating some goodness. Anyway, thank you very much for your time, and I thank you for watching.